I sent in my proposal, my summary, and then I understood that I have undertook mission impossible to explain a nation's relationship with environment in 20 minutes. So instead of trying to squeeze a few academic years worth of material into 20 minutes, I'll just provide you with the titles of what I could tell you if you had a year or so time. Well, thinking of people we do not know, we usually construct stereotypes from bits and pieces we learn. And, of course, there are our stereotypes, our beliefs about the others. But there are also stereotypes, what we think the others think about us, because we know they do. And though, in most cases, these stereotypes are scientifically inaccurate, but they are still worth of study for people like me, representing actually social sciences. So, who are the Latvians as viewed by themselves from the perspective of the others? Well, of course, that's a joke. But you know, a joke is something, it's a way, an excuse to say something you know you believe in, but you know it's not good to say. But every joke carries some truth in it, and that's why it's interesting. The very first mentioning of a Latvian, because Latvians as a nation, Latvian is a newcomer in the great group of nations, with the state being so recent and everything else. So in 1648, in the dedication to great King Vasa from Poland, Latvian is described as a person living in those great forests. The very name is not that clear. How did that originate? So there is an attempt to find etymology of it through cutting down forests, least measure. And there are no ancient Latvian chronicles. Latvian writing is much more recent than the Latvian language, which is, strangely enough, among one of the best preserved old Indo-European languages. The extant chronicles dating back to the 13th century actually are written by foreigners and describe what they found and what they considered to be right and how they saw it. So, in order to learn something about the Latvians, folklore is usually chosen as the source, and folklore has been documented more or less in an organized manner since the 19th century. And as the song texts are rhythmically organized, and they cannot change all that easily as every other tale, including folk tales, legends, and genres like that, we believe that folk song texts might preserve something really ancient. The problem is there's no date stamped on them. And, of course, language changes, interpretation changes, so it's again, whatever we do, we create a stereotype, more or less credible. And what do we find in the folk song texts? The speaker mentions losing the way in his father's field. Actually, tīrums, when translated literally, is related to being clear. It's a clearing. Already in the very name, the field is a clearing where there's no trees left. But whatever you do, forest tends to come back. And the territory of modern-day Latvia has been the theatre of war so many times, and there have been times when of whole regions there have been 10 or so, a dozen people left still alive. You can imagine that the cultivated land reverted to what it was before, forest. And there have been war leaders of other nations declaring to their kings that on the enemy's land there's nothing more to destroy, and there's nothing more where the peasants, the people, the farmsteads. So that's when the forest returned. Again, how did they do that? They cut down the trees and then they burnt them in order to improve the soil. That's why the face, motte, which is literally mouth, is black, ash-soiled. And now I'm going to actually entertain you with pictures, because I believe that is something you would like more.
It's a stereotype.
Sure. That's all we can do. There are no Latvian castles, because they were built of timber, and they were burnt down when attacked. And all we have are castle mounds, but still, with forests being so widely available, timber was the main construction material. So first, just some landscapes. One of the highest hills in northern Latvia, it was actually a castle mound. And you can see, well, that one over there, that's Estonia already. When you go up there, your cell phone switches to Estonian provider immediately. Another one near the Daugava, this was the castle mound, and down there by the river, that was the town defended by the castle. So quite a large one, but of course again built of wood, and nothing is left there still standing. Just when you dig it up, you find it. And middle of the last century, 1950s, you see how these buildings coexist with other buildings. Of course, they were considered remnants of the past, of the ugly past, to be removed and improved by building nice multi-story houses even on the countryside, but they still survived. And you see also the door pattern here that's quite widespread in Western Latvia. When it was not possible to take photos that easily, those were drawn and sent into our archives as something worthy of note. Well, here, take note of this rooftop, because it's actually a representation of a deity of plenitude, because it means everything was double, which normally should be just one. So it's plenty, already more than one. It was probably forgotten, but it was remembered that it must be up on your building to provide you with fertility. This one is a recent one, photographed on a modern building actually. And they are nevertheless still standing. Of course, we do have the so-called ethnographic open-air museum styled after the famous one in Sweden, Skansen. But while these are museum exhibits, there are houses still used and out there. a regular fisherman's cottage near the coast, of course now inhabited by just people living there, mostly elderly, but well, you can't see the sea, it's the dune behind it, but it's right there, a small one, and of course built of wood. And this is the house I spend my summers in, believed to be some 200 years old. A bit different too. And buildings of wood, of timber, are still being built. This is a completely modern one. And Latvia boasts that Riga has probably the largest newly built timber building, which is a restaurant. But you have to come and take a look to judge whether that's claimed true. But although the forests were plenty, not all of them were just simply cut down. Both chronicles and church visitations document forests that were considered sacred. And well, that's again another specific topic I could dwell upon for hours, because those people of the olden times, they probably did not worship the tree, they worshipped the spirit they found or understood as being united with that tree or stone or whatever object. And we do not have temples, we have no Stonehenge of Latvia, but we have sacred forests, at least sites of them still remembered. And although the story I'm going to touch upon briefly is probably not especially true, it was well believed because it was likely. And that's another piece of history, that there once were 3 Baltic people, Latvians, Lithuanians and Prussians, the latter being now completely lost along with the language. And this is the map of what was the Prussian lands. This here is now Poland, Gdańsk is somewhere here, Königsberg is somewhere here, or Kaliningrad. And according to chronicles, in these lands stood a specific temple in a wood, a huge tree that rain would not penetrate, with 3 images of gods displayed there and worshipped by all the nations of the Baltic state, or Baltic people, no states then. And these are, of course, much later representations what it looked like. Of course, we believe more that it was surrounded just by the forest. Latvia still has more trees than people, about 2 million inhabitants and 2.8 million hectares of woods. When leaving Riga, the airport magazine had a nice PR article on Latvia being the 2nd greenest country in Europe, just second to Switzerland. So it's 45% of the whole territory. And I believe you know this monument. Admiral Nelson is standing on the top of the column, which is exactly the height of the mast of his flagship. The masts were made of pine trees, and it's quite likely that this pine came from Latvia, because Latvia, or part of it, was trading with Britain at that time exactly in mast trees. And if we think of the biggest ship built in Scotland in the 16th century, in taking all the trees from Edinburgh to Glasgow, so it's hardly likely that there were enough trees for, unlike French, whose national symbol now at least is built of steel, or the national symbols of Egypt being built of stone. The symbolic item of the Latvians is a piece of furniture made of wood, filled with product of wood, that is paper, containing the Folklore manuscript. Now, if you need more stories, come to me, I'll be around.